just what are your plans for the off season and possibly playing or just doing individual workouts?
Yeah, I mean, probably take a little bit of a break here, just for maybe a week. I don't really want to lose a ton of the stuff I've worked on, and just trying to get my body back to full health. There's some US.
Everything was lined up perfectly. It was supposed to be the victory lap. After nearly 3 decades of operating in the red, subsidized by the NBA and fighting for scraps of media attention, the WNBA finally hit the jackpot. The massive media rights deal was signed. Arenas were sold out. Merchandise was on back order. The league had finally found the one thing it had been missing for 28 years, a transcendental superstar who crossed into mainstream culture. Caitlin Clark didn't just bring fans. She brought an entire economy. But right when the players should have been uniting to secure the bag, something ugly started to rot from the inside. Instead of rolling out the red carpet for the Golden Goose, a faction of the league decided to cook it. We are witnessing one of the most baffling acts of self-sabotage in sports history. The WNBA Players Association opted out of its collective bargaining agreement hoping to negotiate a massive pay raise. But at the same time, a loud, bitter group of veterans seemed determined to bully, batter, and alienate the very player who made those pay raises possible. It's a war between the past and the future. And if the jealous faction isn't careful, they could destroy the negotiation leverage they desperately need. To understand why this is such a catastrophe, we have to look at the numbers. Money doesn't care about feelings, and it definitely doesn't care about seniority. Before Caitlin Clark was drafted, the WNBA was a niche product. That's not an insult, it's a financial fact. The league was losing an estimated $10 to $50 million a year. Then the Clark effect hit. Viewership jumped by over 170% on ESPN. The Indiana Fever, a team that once struggled to fill seats, suddenly led the league in attendance, drawing bigger road crowds than home teams had seen in years. This wasn't just a bump. It was an explosion. This surge of cash and attention gave the Players Association the confidence to opt out of the CBA 2 years early. They looked at the revenue and said, "We want our share," and they are right to do so. The players deserve better travel, higher salaries, and stronger benefits. But this is where the sabotage begins. Negotiations are built on leverage. You have to prove to investors and owners that the product is stable, growing, and professional. Instead, what they saw was a coordinated effort by certain players to physically intimidate and publicly demean the league's biggest asset. It started with comments. Legends of the game, people who should have been mentoring the next generation, went on podcasts and minimized Clark's achievements. They claimed she wouldn't handle the physicality. They said her records weren't that impressive. When that didn't stop the train, the aggression shifted to the court. We all saw the hip checks. We saw the blindside hits that had nothing to do with basketball. To casual viewers, the millions of new fans tuning in, it didn't look like competitive fire. It looked like bullying. It looked like resentment toward the new star getting all the attention. That perception is poison for business. When a league looks like it's eating its own young, advertisers get nervous. Brands like Nike and Gatorade are investing millions into Clark because she represents excellence and excitement. They aren't interested in being tied to a league that looks petty and vindictive. Every cheap shot, whether a hard foul or a shady tweet, chips away at the WNBA's professional image. It sends the message, we're not ready for the big time. But that wasn't the whole story. While the critics were busy trying to humble the rookie, another faction of players began to emerge, the ones who actually understand the assignment. Enter Sophie Cunningham. The Phoenix Mercury guard has become an unlikely but important figure in this narrative. Cunningham isn't Caitlin Clark. She doesn't hold the same records or global following. But she has something many jealous veterans lack: business awareness. Sophie Cunningham represents the new guard. She understands that in 2024, an athlete is also a content creator. She embraces tunnel walks, turning pre-game arrivals into viral fashion moments on social media. She engages with fans, plays with energy, and recognizes that entertainment value pays the bills. You don't see Cunningham going on podcasts complaining that the media talks about Clark too much. Instead, she rides the wave. She knows that more eyes on Clark mean more eyes on Phoenix, which means more eyes on Sophie Cunningham. This is the fundamental split in the WNBA right now. On one side, you have the Sophie Cunninghams and the Caitlin Clarks, players who understand that a rising tide lifts all boats and are ready to build generational wealth from this moment. On the other side, you have the old guard, players stuck in a scarcity mindset. They are used to fighting for crumbs, so when a whole loaf finally appears, their instinct isn't to share it, but to argue over who deserves it more. That scarcity mindset led to the biggest fumble of the year, the Olympic roster. Leaving Caitlin Clark off Team USA for the Paris Olympics will be studied in marketing classes for years as a case study in what not to do. The selection committee, made up of WNBA insiders, argued that Clark hadn't paid her dues and that the roster was based on merit and experience. In a vacuum, maybe that argument holds water. But the Olympics aren't played in a vacuum, they are played on a global stage. By leaving Clark at home, the WNBA effectively told millions of potential viewers, "We don't want you watching." They chose internal politics over global expansion and prioritized veteran feelings over the financial future of the sport. It was a move driven by the same jealous undercurrent that fuels the hard fouls. They wanted to prove the league was bigger than just Caitlin Clark. Well, they proved it. And the Olympic ratings, while decent, were only a fraction of what they could have been. That's money left on the table, money that could have gone straight into players' pockets in the upcoming CBA. Now let's talk about the mechanics of this sabotage. The Players Association is asking for a completely new economic model. They want a revenue split similar to the NBA. Right now, WNBA players only share in revenue if the league hits aggressive targets it rarely reaches. They want a guaranteed 50-50th split of income. On paper, that sounds fair. But for a 50-50th split to work, the income has to keep growing. The owners aren't stupid. They know this growth is fragile. It's heavily tied to the Clark boom. If Caitlin Clark were to get injured, maybe from one of these reckless hard fouls, or retire early because the environment becomes too toxic, that revenue evaporates. TV ratings fall. Ticket sales drop. And that $2.2 billion deal suddenly looks unstable. By targeting Clark, certain players are increasing the risk for the owners. And when risk goes up, offers go down. Owners will hesitate to guarantee millions in salaries if they believe the players are actively hurting the product. There's also the equity trap. A major talking point from the jealous faction is fairness. They argue, "I've been in this league for 10 years. Why does the rookie get private jets? Why does the media only talk about her?" That's a fundamental misunderstanding of the entertainment business. In the NBA, LeBron James gets more attention than a bench player. That isn't unfair, it's reality. Veterans demanding equal spotlight without generating equal revenue come across as disconnected from how the business actually works. Sophie Cunningham exposes this perfectly. She didn't demand attention. She earned it. She built a brand. She understood that if you want the camera, you have to give it something worth filming. She creates moments. The bitter players, on the other hand, are asking for attention simply because they exist. They feel owed, and that sense of entitlement is poisoned during negotiations. You can't negotiate from entitlement. You negotiate from value. And the sabotage goes deeper than hard fouls. It's narrative warfare. Throughout the season, there were coordinated attempts to label new fans as racist or misogynistic simply for supporting Clark. Yes, trolls exist online, they always will. But painting the entire new fan base with that brush was a strategic disaster. Players were essentially attacking paying customers. Imagine walking into a store and the employee yells at you for liking the wrong product. You wouldn't come back. By antagonizing the very fans Clark brought in, certain players are shrinking the league's growth ceiling. They are gatekeeping the WNBA, keeping it a small exclusive club instead of letting it grow into a global powerhouse. That's the definition of self-sabotage. They would rather be queens of a tiny hill than partners in a massive empire. The CBA negotiations will bring all of this to a head. The current agreement expires after the 2025 season, and the clock is ticking. The owners hold the capital, which means they can afford to wait. Can the players? Most WNBA athletes still play overseas in the off-season just to make ends meet. They desperately need this new deal, but to secure the life-changing money they talk about, they need unity. And that brings us to the silence of Caitlin Clark. Through the cheap shots, the media snubs, and the constant noise, Clark has stayed stoic. She hasn't lashed out. She hasn't called anyone out. She just plays. That silence is deafening. It highlights the immaturity of her critics and makes the veterans looking for fights seem like they're shadowboxing. More importantly, it signals to owners that she's the adult in the room. The league will be built around Clark, Cunningham, and the players who understand the moment. The next CBA will likely include incentives for marketing and fan engagement. We may see a shift where money flows more heavily toward players who actually drive revenue, leaving the jealous faction behind. The irony is that by fighting Clark's dominance so aggressively, they're only speeding up the transition. They are proving the old insular, us against the world mentality is obsolete. The tragedy is that it didn't have to be this way. Look at the NBA in the 1980s. Magic Johnson and Larry Bird battled fiercely on the court, but they understood their rivalry was saving the league. They promoted the game together. They knew they were also business partners. WNBA veterans had the same opportunity with Clark. They could have embraced the rivalry, hyped the matchups, and turned every game into must-watch television. Instead, many chose to delegitimize her. This is where the Sophie Cunningham solution comes in. She proves you don't have to be Caitlin Clark to win in this new era, you just have to stop hating. Cunningham shows there's plenty of room for multiple stars. The spotlight Clark brought is big enough for everyone, if they step into it instead of trying to smash the bulb. Cunningham's contract extensions and endorsement deals prove the market rewards adaptability. And the sabotage isn't just about money. It's about legacy. The veterans want to be remembered as pioneers who built the league, and they are. But right now, they're writing a final chapter that risks painting them as the villains. Years from now, when people look back at the WNBA's explosion, they'll see the footage of the cheap shots. They'll read the bitter quotes. And it will stain the legacy of players who were truly great on the court but couldn't handle the ego check off it. So what happens next? The negotiations will probably get ugly. A lockout is a real possibility if players demand too much while simultaneously damaging the product. Owners could play hardball, pointing to the toxic culture as proof that revenue projections aren't guaranteed. They might say, "Fix your house before asking for a bigger allowance." The Players Association needs a serious internal reset. They have to quiet the voices of division and align themselves with their biggest asset. It's time for the jealous players to swallow their pride for the sake of their wallets. If they can't, the market will teach them the hard way that business is ruthless. The WNBA is finally a major league enterprise, and in business you either adapt or get left behind. The combination of Clark's silent dominance and Cunningham's outspoken success is the blueprint. It shuts down the argument that the league is unfair. It proves the only real thing holding the WNBA back right now is the attitude of some of its own players. The money is there. The fans are there. The future is sitting right in front of them wearing a number 22 jersey. The only question left is whether the jealous faction will stop trying to tackle the future and start cashing in on it. Because make no mistake, the train is leaving the station. Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham are already on board, sitting in first class. The rest of the league has a decision to make: get on and enjoy the ride, or stay on the platform arguing about the ticket price while the opportunity of a lifetime disappears into the distance. The sabotage has to stop, or the CBA negotiations won't be a payday, they'll be a reality check. And for some players, that reality is going to be very, very expensive.